Welcome to Framework. Ho, ho, ho. It's the end of the year, and we are talking today about something that's been on my mind lately. What are the great films of the 21st century? The last 24 years, in this case, as we turn into 2024 here. My name is John. I'm one of the hosts of Framework. With me, as always, is the other host of Framework, Al. How are you today, Al?
I'm all right. I'm feeling confused but belligerent. So,
perfect mindset.
You're going to explain to me what is going on, and then I will figure out how to fight you on it.
It is so complicated. You're going to love it. Joining us, we have two guests today. Two guests coming into the ring to have this conversation with us. First off, Gwen, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight.
And Dan, welcome back to the program as well.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Okay.
Dan Shea most recently joined us for our Thief episode, although wait, maybe that hasn't even come out yet. So maybe we're Piranha 2. And Gwen, were you on for Titanic last?
That might have been the last one.
Yeah.
Starman.
Starman.
Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. Well, yes, you're familiar with the show and familiar with us, which, is necessary for what we're doing today because, it's a complicated idea. I'm not that bad, really. We are going to do a draft of the great movies of the 21st century, things that have come out since the year 2000 that are all-time classic films. Now, to start this off, I'm going to tell you what it is not. And that is not a list of our favorite movies. These are not going to be the films that we personally love more than anything. I believe the example I used for you guys, because it is the holiday season, was the movie Krampus, which is a strange puppet horror film from 2016. It's one of my personal favorites. But it would be ridiculous to me to suggest that this is a classic film that is going to live on and stand the test of time and be spoken of in the same hallowed tones that we use for things like A Clockwork Orange or Casablanca or Citizen Kane. That is a personal favorite. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're talking about the big ones.
Okay. This touches on my big question here is so we're talking about the Sight and Sound poll.
Yes.
That's So we're not talking about, if we're doing this for the 80s and I nominated Die Hard or Ghostbusters, those are classics of their genre. They're revered to a degree, but they're not going to make those hoity-toity lists.
No, I disagree. I think those belong. I think those are important.
Those
films
do belong.
That everyone has seen and love.
Okay.
Those are significant movies. And I mean, you can go to the 90s. You can be like Pulp Fiction. Yes, of course, obviously. Shawshank Redemption. Jurassic Park, even. These are canonically great films that are going to be watched 50 years from now that kind of represent the era they came out in and are just going to be cultural touchstones. And so this is sort of the idea being this will be Framework's first stab at guessing what those are going to be. What are this first quarter of the 21st century? What are the things that stand out? What are the ones that are going to last the test of time, be watched on futuristic Turner Classic Movies in 2075?
This is less about arguing for the merits of a movie than just trying to prognosticate what film literati are going to think 20, 40 years from now.
Well, I think that I think you'll have to like the film to make the argument. I think it has to be something
not necessarily
that you believe belongs. I don't know if you think a movie is bad. I guess you could come at it from the perspective of just I don't like this film, but I'm clearly in the minority, and I think it will be important going forward. You could do that, I suppose.
I'd say there's enough really, really great movies that we can all agree are great that
we probably don't need.
None of us have something we hate.
That's fair.
Well, we'll see. Maybe not. I'm curious. Is my perception what I think these movies are, the obvious no-brainers, is that do other people feel that way? And we're trying to get a variety of people here, that are not all just going to be of hive mind like me and Al tend to be sometimes. So, that is why we've asked you, Gwen, and you, Dan, to join us for this. So, how's this going to work? Well, it is first and foremost going to be a conversation just about titles and being like, okay, well, will this one stand up, etc. But we are gamifying it to a degree and turning it into a draft. And what that's going to mean in this context is there will be 12 movies that we select for the canonical framework list of the great films of the 21st century. And we're going to go a round robin style. So it'll be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Each of us will get a pick. And we'll do it 3 times for the list of 12.
Okay.
And then we'll go around the circle once somebody is selected, and people can share what they think about it with the potential to veto. Each one of us has one veto that you can use one time. So if I say Krampus, if I say I think Krampus, one of the great films of the 21st century, then, well, I presume whoever is after me can then be like, I veto Krampus.
So if I veto you, do you then pick a replacement for Krampus, or you just don't get that spot lies
You
fallow?
get to pick a replacement.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Is there like a round of vetoes after each round of selections?
Well, yeah, just a round of everybody to have
Anybody wants?
Yeah, have a word on, does this one merit it for you? Yes, absolutely. Well, I don't know, but I'm not going to veto it. Or no, I veto. You know, like, do you think it hits the criteria, the nebulous, undefined criteria that we're looking for here? And so, you know, something may play that you just don't feel is right, but you're like, well, it's not wrong enough for me to waste my veto on, because you only have the one. And of course, once a thing is vetoed, it cannot come back. You can't do it again the next round. It's off the list for good, written out of the book of life.
Right. So if I play my cards correctly, I could use up all your guys' vetoes. I have 3 picks, and there's 3 potential. And okay, I can.
Well, you know, they don't actually carry over or have value beyond this conversation, so it is in your interest to use.
No, but it's sort of just like shooting the moon in hearts, maybe like. All right, let's somebody kick us off here. Let's get the ball rolling, and then we'll figure out how to properly yell at each other about unprovable taste.
Okay, well, so the way we're going to do this, because you know, it could take a time to figure out a draft order. We're not going to do that. We're just going to go alphabetical. So it's going to go Al, Dan, Gwen, John, and that is the order that we're going to go in. You will start it off, Al.
All right, just total chalk, I guess. I'm going to go with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Or if you insist that that's doesn't count, I'll just say Fellowship. If I have to pick one, maybe I'll just do that because if one of you guys tries to pull any bullshit about like I picked Twin Peaks: The Return because it's really a 17-hour movie if you think about it, I'm not going to bother vetoing it. I'm just going to stand up and go throw my computer in the trash like Ron Swanson.
I have foreseen your question, and I agree. I think The Lord of the Rings should count as one. I think that when we're talking about those movies, we're talking about those movies. And so, yes, The Fellowship can be your stand-in, but I why bother? It's all 3 of them.
That's the thing, and it's not just a lack of not wanting to choose between my favorite babies, because I don't care. I'll pick one out of a hat. But part of the reason why you have to do all 3 of them and is because the thing that makes those what they are and makes them classics is how they do not operate as single entities. And that marks a real turning point, inflection point at the start of the 21st century for what sequels are. Because it used to be sequels were reruns, you know, sort of Xeroxes with a few different, you know, settings might have changed or whatever, but they were designed to be able to be viewed by people who had not seen the originals. And so you just repeat a lot of stuff. And now the streaming era had not quite started yet, but Lord of the Rings lays a lot of the groundwork for the assumption that anybody who wants to watch part 3 of this has access and ability to watch part 1 and 2 just as easily.
That's true. And they're also great.
Yeah. Also the production design out of this world. Good.
Yeah. These are films that couldn't have been made in the 20th century, literally. And I would also add to that, like, in general, I think it sort of led the way in specifically more fantasy into franchises, and like the way that Peter Jackson uses technology to make what would have been a nerd film a blockbuster, I think is really incredible.
Yeah, it's also part of the mainstreaming of nerddom. Even like in a way more than Star Wars, like had already kind of done that.
It's kind of ground zero. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's a movie with elves and dwarves and that before Lord of the Rings that had that level of success.
Well, there's very few things that have.
Well, like, but
no, but I mean, in terms of like,
I mean, the 80s
cultural footprint, it's like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. Like, there's not very many like contemporaries of that level of success. I mean, there's like the Marvel movies and Harry Potter, I guess, is about a size.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
but those kind of had the groundwork was set. I don't know when does the Sorcerer's Stone come out? It's pretty close to Lord of the Rings,
I think it's year 2000 probably.
Really? Is it? Then it's been before.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a moonshot. The fact that those things worked out the way they did is kind of amazing. I remember when they cast Harry Potter, they originally were saying like, well, these kids will be around for like 3 films, maybe. I don't know if we're gonna make all of these. There was not a plan to do a contiguous series that lasted the entire run of the show, the books. Lord of the Rings, on the other hand, was like, no, we're shooting them all at once. All 3 movies at once. It's like one movie, essentially. It's going to have every single cast member. It's going to be the same production vision. So it's an enormous gamble right off the top. And it paid off about as much as anything could. It's wild those movies were Oscar contenders. I mean, it's not because they're excellent, but like, who would have guessed?
In 1999, nobody would have guessed. And
yeah. And then Best Picture, right, for Return of the King?
Probably the weakest of the 3, honestly, but that's just how the Oscars roll. You don't get it for the one you deserve it most of the time. Most of the time you get it for the one after they miss the one you deserved. But no, that's Harry Potter is in some ways, a bigger series because there's more entries, but they're more traditional production. Like you said, that they made one at a time. And what Lord of the Rings did with making them all together, that became sort of a model for really high budget things. More so, not usually 3, but they started doing 2 at a time more often. And it's because Lord of the Rings were so successful, but commercially and artistically, that became a viable method of doing giant mega budget filmmaking.
I often find that the 2 at a time model doesn't work as well. Like it's really kind of hard to pull off. Those films tend to get like scattered and very very messy and overstuffed as often as not. And the Rings trilogy, there's just even The Hobbit falls victim to this, but there's like a purity of vision in those movies, that is remarkable. And I think that working off of that text certainly helps in that regard. But man, they got the right people for the right job in that case. Everybody involved in those is working at the absolute top of their game. And with just passion, you can feel it. It's coming off the screen.
Does it feel like with 2 at a time, it just ends up with one good one bad one all the time?
Or 2 bad ones.
Yeah, okay. Maybe that too, yeah. I just wonder what that is. I mean, I think it's probably the 2 at a time thing seems to be largely about trying to split a final chapter of something into 2 distinct pieces, two whole meals, and they end up imbalanced in that way. Whereas Lord of the Rings was sort of always conceived from the jump as a 3-part thing. And obviously the books are built that way too. So there's no other way. It fits there in a way it doesn't fit necessarily the Matrix sequels or, Harry Potter Part 7, Part 1, Harry Potter Part 7, Part 2. Unwieldy to even say.
Yeah, that to this day, that it's still. I mean, I don't know. I can't really think of another example of that working since Lord of the Rings. The best you could say is maybe like the Back to the Future movies, which is sort of a one-off that does not.
That was the only one I could think of that they did back to back, and I was like, because it was 1 and 2 of Back to the Future they did back at the same time, right?
No, it was 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Oh, it was 2 and 3.
It's often 2 and 3 after the first one hits. Pirates of the Caribbean did that.
Right.
Yeah. It's,
badly.
Badly, yes. And so it goes.
Okay. So
look,
nobody's going to fight me on this
one.
choice. Yeah, obviously. We should move on to something potentially controversial here. So
I mean, there's no way this one wouldn't have had been on the list. They're beloved.
Well, that being said, though, it's not on many, many, many critics' lists. So
Yeah,
Is it the trends that it started, do you think? The negative, like, franchise content world that we're now in is
Yeah, I think so.
It feels weird to place that at Lord of the Rings feet, though, rather than Star Wars, for example.
or Marvel, or well, I mean, it is.
Well, people do put it at Marvel's feet all the time.
Yeah, it is the progenitor. But I mean, I do think it stands aside because it is exceptional. And I think maybe the reason it's not on critics' list is because it's not hoity-toity enough. Perhaps. I mean, it's kind of obviously great to me. It's, I think we're all
other factors I could see for that. Not hoity-toity enough. Also, like, ultimately was acknowledged at the Academy Awards,
right,
in a huge and historic way. So people feel like the dues were paid to that.
And
then the Hobbit movie follow-ups being crap.
I think that had a lot to do with it too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right. So yeah, top of the list. Although this is, of course, not a ranked list. The first entry picked, Lord of the Rings, will have as much merit as the last. We're not doing that. So that, we're not 1 to 12 here. So Dan, the choice is yours. What is your first pick here?
Boy, and I've had so much time to think about it, and it still is just hard to make a decision, isn't it? So I am just going to go with instinct, and I'm going to say Royal Tenenbaums. Wes Anderson.
Okay. That was one of my potential ones.
Was it? Yeah, I think it's, and it was tough. It was one of those where I knew, I'm like, okay, a Wes Anderson is going to be one of my picks. Which one am I going with? And that's where I started to get stuck with, like, am I picking my favorite, or am I picking, like, and I'm trying to figure this out myself. Like, am I really thinking about what's going to be the most popular in 50 years, or what do I just think is the best one? I ended up going with the one that actually checks both of those boxes. I think I love Royal Tenenbaums. I think it's the best. And I part of my justification of picking that one, as far as standing the test of time. And I think it's such a great, it's his, I would say one of his first of, really the Wes Anderson style, like the really digging in on that. Cause it's third overall, right? Am I getting that right? It's
Bottle Rocket, Rushmore, Tenenbaums.
And then
it's pretty fully formed by Rushmore, though, I would say.
Yeah, but I say Royal Tenenbaums really establishes his style much more than Rushmore does.
Yeah, Rushmore is like almost like a Wes Anderson movie dipping into the real world. And it's like, okay, so you kind of get this like anachronistic, or whatever the opposite of that word is, like this kind of like timeless character in more of a real world situation. Whereas Tenenbaums is like dropping the audience into, like, you don't know what year it is. It could be 1940. It could be the year 2001. There's some hints, but it's like you feel like you kind of walk through the looking glass into this weird Wes Anderson world. And I think, I mean, for me, it's one of the best uses of that. And I think I like all his movies. I'm a fan, and I won't even say, I don't want to go into, because some of his others might still show up on this list, so I don't want to like jump ahead.
Oh no, we're not doing more than one Wes Anderson. That would be ludicrous.
I don't know. I can't control what other people pick.
No, but I think
we'll go.
Somebody might like the Fantastic Mr. Fox so much they want to throw it up there. I don't know.
Good movie.
Maybe. Well, okay, I'll make an argument here real quick, a counter argument, since we're not going to actually choose it. But for starters, I think you're absolutely right that, Rushmore is more about a Wes Anderson character clashing with a more real world, like Mac Fisher is the Wes Anderson character. And whereas Tenenbaums, the entire world is just a Wes Anderson world, and every character is Wes Anderson character and all that. So that's something I hadn't given any thought to, but that's true. The only alternative here, I would say, if you were to poll critics right now, I think maybe the consensus would be that Grand Budapest Hotel is his best movie, or his most lauded movie. And while I agree with Dan, Royal Tenenbaums is, I think, the best and my favorite. Do we think it's going to, like, that critical consensus will ever come around to our correct opinion?
I'll say that's the other one. Grand Budapest Hotel was the one that I was thinking of otherwise, because of that reason, because it like is at the top. And a lot of people I talk to list that as their favorite Wes Anderson. So more. And I think I'd probably have it in my top 3. That or Moonrise Kingdom. I think those are great. But I don't. So it was really tough to decide. But I think Royal Tenenbaums is so funny. It's so like, and I think there's a timeless humor to it that like will still be funny in 40 or 50 years, like thinking about comedies of the 21st century that have come out. Some of them are like, okay, are people still going to be laughing at that in 2060? and Tenenbaums.
We'll talk about Jackass 3D when we get selected. But
Wait, are we only doing one Jackass on this list, or
I think so.
okay? All right.
I know I opened the door to 3 Lord of the Rings movies. I think we should. No. Does anybody want to make the case that there's a better Wes Anderson than Tenenbaums for this purpose?
I think you could certainly argue that Grand Budapest is at least on par with Royal Tenenbaums in terms of like what's the better movie. But I would agree that like going to where the beginning of what you would say is Wes Anderson, and I agree, it's like unbelievably funny, and there aren't a ton of comedies that show up in these lists.
No.
And the fact that it can be funny and also have a devastating suicide scene is quite a feat.
And it's funny after that scene too.
Yeah.
Like it's the control of tone he has in this film is exceptional. It was between this and Grand Budapest for me. I had Grand Budapest was going to be the one I was leaning towards. Perhaps I am biased because of hotel stuff, but more than that, like I couldn't possibly veto this. This is an incredible film. This is an excellent movie, and it's totally valid for this list. And I think it probably is a little more universal in its way. I think this is one that I think probably if you had to pull the vast majority of people, this would be the one. Not critics necessarily, but all the really cool touches that he's so famous for, the hermetically sealed diorama sets, every room in that place is distinct and incredibly well designed and gorgeous to look at. The performances, I think, is the best performance of Gene Hackman's career, which is saying an enormous amount. He's a phenomenal actor and not associated with this kind of character, this sort of shitty paterfamilias kind of guy. He's usually
I think
a hard
he fits it pretty well.
Oh, he's perfect. He's perfect.
He's
It
perfect.
is.
He's
If we were
phenomenal.
drafting specifically just performances of the millennium, I think Royal Tenenbaum is one of the first round Hall of Fame pick. First ballot, I guess it's called there.
And absolutely, some people just in their absolute prime too. I mean, I'd call it Owen Wilson's prime. Gwyneth Paltrow is in her
It's
prime.
Yeah.
Favorite
it's
Gwyneth
like,
Paltrow, yes.
Stiller.
Yeah, Stiller in his prime. Luke Wilson as prime as he got. I mean, he's a guy.
It is.
And I like Luke
Angelica
Wilson.
Houston has just been coasting at a prime level since Adam's
she's
Family Values.
She doesn't have a prime. Sure, her prime lasted from the first time she stepped out in front of a camera. Till,
a great film. It's a great film.
The more I think about it, the more I think this is the right one. Partially because if you were thinking in terms of like iconography, and you ask people, people know like a Wes Anderson character type, and if you ask people to name the best Wes Anderson characters, like as great as Ralph Fiennes is in Budapest Hotel, anybody from a critic to a more layperson, you ask him to name the 5 best Wes Anderson characters, and it's probably going to be Max Fisher and then 4 Tenenbaums. Like they're Halloween costumes. They're iconic looks.
True.
Gustav you could do a Halloween costume of him.
Sure, but you've seen Margot's and Richie's out on the street.
Yeah,
People love Zizou.
That's true.
Zizou's got a good Halloween costume
that was
too.
One, yeah, that's actually I love. Dude, that was one that I caught off my because I was like, I just don't hear people talk about it as much. You see it as the Halloweens, but it's one of my. It's got, I think, some of my favorite moments are in Zizou, but it just as an overall that was a tough one to cut off, but that was one that I was like, I'm bringing my own personal opinions to this one, and
Zizou, it feels like it is overlooked critically. I think it's very funny, but it feels like if it was going to have its revival, it would have by now. And ultimately, stacking up against Tenenbaums and what Gwen mentioned earlier, its big, tragic, sincere tragedy moment is not as well integrated as the suicide, attempt in Tenenbaums.
Mm.
I think that ultimately is what places it on a lower tier.
maybe the best music in Zizou though. All those French
but
David Bowie
Tenenbaums
songs
is great
those are
too.
so
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
They're all really good soundtracks.
Really good
Yeah.
soundtracks across the board for him. But there's.
I'll say he's a good filmmaker. You know what? Wes Anderson is good at making films.
I don't care who knows it. Yes.
Yeah, it's a shame that his flesh was devoured by that AI, and now it's just a robot imitating his ticks. Anyway,
next on Turner Classic Movies.
Who's up
All right,
next?
Gwen, you are up.
All right. Yep. I'm gonna come in with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Oh, cool. Okay, cool.
I'm glad somebody else did this one because it's a personal favorite of mine. But I was having like a real internal crisis about. But does it fit this criteria, or do I just love it that much?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely on my list of favorite movies of all time. But in my research for this, which was extensive, I looked at many, many, many lists of top films of the 21st century, and it's on like almost all of them. And I am a Charlie Kaufman obsessive, so I kind of feel like he captures something about the angst of the aughts really, really well. And then it's one of the most romantic movies in the world, and the performances are amazing. And Michel Gondry does the most exciting filmmaking I think I had seen up till that point. I'd never seen someone represent consciousness in film so beautifully.
Yeah,
And that filmmaking is so important. I feel like because it's like I said, it's very romantic, and it feels so strange to call it realistic because the filmmaking is so impressionistic and you know over the top, but that is just because like the romance stuff and the relationship stuff is so bracingly real that you kind of need that a spoonful of sugar to and it works so well. Like I never want to turn away from that movie even at its ugliest moments. Not true of every Charlie Kaufman movie. Charlie Kaufman's absolute genius, but when the balance is out of whack, yeah, it's when his stuff tips over to the line to me, it becomes just intolerable.
Right, and that's why I mean I think in 100 years they're gonna look back and say like, "Wow, Synecdoche, New York was that was a great movie," but the masses are not going to say that because it's too uncomfortable, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas I think it's shockingly easy to access, you know, it's very accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And it shouldn't be in so many ways because of the way the storytelling is very confusing and because it's about kind of a sad loser, you know.
But also if we're sort of incidentally creating another best performance of the century list, we got like, I mean, Andy Serkis's Gollum has to be one of the most important performances ever.
Yes.
You think whatever you think of the craft, it changed shit. And Royal Tenenbaum and Kate Winslet, I mean, just one of the best performances in any movie ever.
Yeah, Winslet's the one in that. Everyone's great, but she's so good in that film. It's incredible.
And being the best performance of Kate Winslet's career is a really high bar to clear. But this is it.
There is a universal quality to that film that I'm not even sure how it taps it out because the characters are so specific. But it I think anyone can relate to both of them really. Is it what's his name in that? Joel? Is that
Joel?
Joel.
Yeah.
Joel and Clementine. They both feel like real people. Absolutely,
Very much so.
Even with all their tics, but they also feel like, you know, like I've been there. You know, so many times is how that feels with a lot of individual moments. You know, I've had that experience in a relationship. Oh God, yeah.
No, even I had not had when it first came out. I had not had those experiences in a relationship, but I still felt it really heavily. Like this just feels real. You know, no matter how crazy the POV, you know, cinematography gets, it just feels so real.
And there are certainly complaints that Clementine is a manic pixie dream girl. It's a trope that I understand why people have a problem with, and I see how you can apply it to her. But
the movie interrogates that like so explicitly that it's all the first relationship is about him having these projected expectations on her, and the movie is very much about that, even before that term had been coined. You know.
Yeah, and
I would
make the argument that the term exists because
of Garden State.
Men think because it's not just an archetype. It's like literally the way many men see women as that. So
The solution to all my problems. Yes.
it's problematic if you're like pushing that narrative of that's all that she is. But I would say that this film is spending very much of the time trying to say the opposite.
It's certainly a type of man, a nerdy, socially inept type that might be interested in writing as a career. So
well,
it might get overrepresented a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the most popular archetypes of the new century. That guy. I mean, in all his good and evils, is kind of like a well represented type of character, and this is one of the best ones. Right? This is one of the best versions of that character for sure.
And it's such an effective romance, and it's as much about falling out of love as it is about falling in love.
Very much, yeah.
Which makes it stand out from the pack of romances.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of equally good at both.
I just gotta say, I haven't seen this. I'll be honest. I saw this movie when it came out, maybe 2 or 3 times, and was obsessed with it. Was a film student at the time, so it was like right up the alley of like that, and have not watched it since. And I'm just so excited to hear that it's still, because I think it's one that I've like kind of avoided because I was like, well, maybe it's not going to be as good as it was when I was 19 or 20, and like thinking of like that, like Manic Pixie Dream. And like the thing is like, so to hear you guys talk about, I may go watch it within the next like day or two, like knowing that it stands the test of time. That's
it is excellent.
Yeah, but I don't.
My only quibble here is, does it fit the criteria we have laid out here? Because I guess it does make those lists.
I think it's going to be around.
I don't hear people talk about it in the world that much.
I think it's going to come back. It's like you said, some of the best work of most of the people involved. I mean, I could make the argument for almost everyone in it. Well, I don't know. You get like Mark Ruffalo, Kirsten Dunst have had pretty great careers. Tom Wilkinson, of course, played Carmine Falcone in Batman Begins. And
David Cross has made better birdhouses subsequently.
But the important ones, Kaufman, Gondry, Carey, and Winslet, I think it's obviously, and those are brilliant careers, all of them. So, I think this one lasts, and I think the way it speaks to people will make it last. It's extraordinary. I'm glad it's on this list. That's a great film. And
you still see it referenced in the zeitgeist, at least like on Twitter. I'll still see people say, I wish I could eternally sunshine that out of my mind.
That's another thing that helps.
Video, like it's like it's become like a phrase people use.
Yeah, it's mimetic that way, and that is something like the Halloween costumes. Not necessarily a marker of objective quality, but definitely a contributing factor to what survives in the culture. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Eternal Sunshine has that sort of that conceit that then, like Inception, they're like we use Xerox when we mean a copy, or Kleenex when we mean a tissue. It's whatever. There's a word for that, but it just coins those words.
Opposite of Inception. That'd be a fun double feature, maybe.
Yeah. Well, John, if you want to pick Inception, now's your chance.
I'm not picking Inception, not yet. Anyway, no, my pick. I'm going to pick for my first pick. I'm going to pick Get Out.
Nice.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I'll make my case.
Okay.
This is, I think, an important film. I think an influential film, a film that had made an obvious, huge mark. I think what this movie is doing is next level brilliant. Specifically, and I think the mechanics of the plot, I think you could quibble with, but what this movie does that is extraordinary, I think, is that it shows microaggressions. Shows the sort of small underlying ways that racism presents itself in everyday life as horror movie sequences, as moments of tension and suspense, and in doing so, makes them relatable, understandable, and creates empathy in a way that no film has done before. It sort of demonstrates these things in a way that any white person can understand what's going on, and shows that there's sort of a visceral quality, just sort of a gut feeling, not unlike a horror film, present in these things. And I think that it makes sense of something that has never really been. It's been difficult to vocalize or verbalize, explain, and I think it becomes a visceral sense in this film. Yeah.
Okay. I think this is sort of like an obvious choice. Like I can't justify a veto on this because it's already had the impact you're talking about. It's already, and even with like the sunken place, kind of has its own
mimetic quality,
neologism that it created. And there's shorthand now based on this film, and also it created almost a whole new subgenre of the social thriller that now it's like. To get A24 to write a check, you need to at least be able to bluff it having some sort of underlying social metaphor, a la Get Out.
But this is not even an A24. This is Blumhouse. This is just like right down the center of the plate, like audience enjoyment, kind of like here's a crowd pleasing horror film.
Okay, so let me the line of attack I can come up with on this. This is, and I'm not sure how much I believe this, but it's my prosecutorial side. Come on, and.
Sure.
Okay.
I want to hear it.
One simple one is, do people decide over time that pulling the punch at the end was the wrong move? Like this would have been a stronger horror movie if it didn't have the happy ending at the end. Because it's set up for a Night of the Living Dead ending, and then like fakes that way and goes the other way. That made it a crowd pleaser, and that definitely contributed to the level of success it had. But do horror purists turn on it at a certain point?
I don't think so because it is that moment still exists when you sit the flashing red and blue lights. You have that moment of just like, oh shit, you think you know what he's going to do, and he gives you crowd pleasing instead. He gives you like what you want to see happen. And the movie is sort of a comedy already. I mean, it is a comedy of manners in a lot of ways, even as it does work as horror. It's satire too.
And I would make the argument that, like you said, because we already have that sinking feeling the moment we see a cop car, that the point has been made. And therefore, like giving these Black people a chance to like take care of each other and have some hope at the end, I think is more revolutionary in terms of the history of the way Black people have been treated in cinema.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's truly a trope of the Black person dying first in all the movies. So to have one where they make it to the end, I think you're right, that you're turning it on its head and saying...
There's a way, I guess, the other line of attack is this going to feel very much of its time as time marches?
Yes, it is. But that's good.
I hope so.
Yeah, but that's okay. I think that's fine. A lot of great movies of the 60s and 70s are of their time, I think. Like, what's the In the Heat of the Night?
I was going to say In the Heat of the Night.
One of the best movies ever made. I watched that 2 years ago and was like, this is incredible. It's the fact that it put me in 1967 was what made it great.
There's a particular way in which I feel like this is of its time or of its era, especially that's maybe not such a good thing, but what tied to that happy endingness is I do feel like there is a defining thing of the teens, especially, is that movies have gotten a bit softer, a bit more aspirational, especially as more efforts are being made at inclusion, and we want to deliver those happy endings and all that. And I wonder if that is going to date that era identifiably. Like even our horror movies went soft a bit in this time.
I don't know, man.
I don't think it's bad to have a happy ending. And maybe that's just me. Like I understand. Now I'm not a big horror film person. Like I appreciate the genre, but I don't seek them out. But I love Get Out, and maybe that's it. Maybe it's like the non-horror people tend to like this more because there is that breath at the end. But I would rather have that. I would rather have a movie that I watch and that I'm tense the whole time and that bad things happen and all this, and then you get to the end and there's a satisfying conclusion. I know that can be cheap in some movies, but like overall, sometimes if I feel a movie gives me a sad ending or gives me a death of a main character just because they don't want to make it easy, I'm like, well, what was the point of any of this then? Why make me watch? Like your decision for doing that was just to not take the easy way out. And I don't think that's good filmmaking or storytelling. I think it's whatever the makes for the best story is what the best storytelling is.
Well, it depends.
I would also say that, like, while the focus of this movie is this particular community of evil white people, and they may get defeated, racism is the real villain of the film, you could say. And we know that that's not defeated at the end. So, like, a tiny triumph, I think, is worth it. And I don't think that's soft, because we know that, like, because that sinking feeling was there, racism isn't done. So,
and I also think it's worth, the movie is just like flat out wildly entertaining too, as are all Jordan Peele's films. He is an incredible storyteller. And I think that it's easy to talk about the sort of the political ideas of the film and the ways it's doing something new and fresh and has the thing to say. It is one of the most entertaining movies of the last 20 years too. I think it is, just like the pacing, the timing of this thing. It is so well cut. The performances are so on point. You are so on this guy's side. The Allison Williams character turn is incredible. It's just an expertly conceived object. It's top to bottom. I'm thrilled with it. There's just the little horror movie stuff that it does that kind of puts us in familiar territory. Like the score. Sort of they have a creepy fiddle that plays. Like it's straight out of a Conjuring film throughout. It's he's so intelligent about the semiotics of cinema language. What an asshole statement to make. The semiotics of cinema language, but you know what I mean. He's really good at using what we know to tell his story and make his point and do it all at once. Yeah,
sure, and to do it under 2 hours. Which
it's like
for this era,
hour 35 or something.
It's hour 40.
Yeah,
it's like an hour 40, and that's it's such a lost art these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, the conceit, I think, it can't hold up to a lot more scrutiny than that. And unfortunately, to make a movie, it has to be 2 hours and a half hours, or else you can't get it released into a theater, it feels like. But this
is so weird that happened.
The last one I can think of that had this level of success without going that route.
Even us and Nope are kind of a little too long, honestly.
Right. Well, okay. So look, I'm trying to see if there's any angle of attack on this thing that could possibly, like, just say if there was going to be a turnaround consensus on this, what could I envision it being? I'm not sure how much I buy any of that.
Well, I think
that's the only thing I can think of, and it's sort of like also.
I think there is a slight backlash, honestly, already for Get Out. A little bit. Just like that it got a little overpraised, shouldn't have won Oscars, I mean, because it is, it's a $20 million horror film they released in February. They didn't expect anything out of this thing, and it blew up. So, I think any time the movie succeeds as much as Get Out does, it invites a little bit of pushback, which I think has happened and has already been dispatched with, to be honest.
And I would say also that for this particular premise, this particular prompt that you've given us, John, I think the movies that, like, society really needs the most are the ones that they're not going to forget 50 years from now. And I think we really needed this really bad.
Oh, yeah. I believe this came out February of 2017, right? Yeah, everyone was like just a little bit on edge.
Well, the Cubs had just won the World Series. Is that what you're referring to? Everything was topsy-turvy.
Yeah, the world was upside down for sure at that point. One thing I considered when I was like toying with the idea of just baiting your vetoes and trying to make some wilder predictions, just for the sake, if one of them comes true 10 years from now, I could crow about it. But was trying to say, actually, the Jordan Peele movie that's going to get reevaluated as Get Out's going to fall in people's estimations, and Us is going to rise up as the film bros decide that Get Out got a little too successful, a little too mainstream, and maybe got overpraised because you had the well-meaning, center-left white people that are the target of the satire falling over themselves to praise it just so
like us right now,
separate themselves from the villains. Yeah. And so I'm one of the ones that gets it. I'm not one of the ones he's talking about.
I would have voted for Obama.
And that maybe Us is a little more but maybe Us is a little more difficult. It's a little it's stranger and more ambitious in certain ways, and maybe among the more pointy-headed film fans, it gets a reevaluation down the line. Also has Lupita Nyong'o, one of those like Rushmore performances for the century.
Absolutely. And I actually think you could make the argument for any of Jordan Peele's 3 films being his best. I think they're all kind of excellent in their own way, and I love them all. I think Get Out is probably the one that just kind of touched the most nerve culturally, you know, and it was just such a landmark because it came out of nowhere. It was like Jordan Peele made an excellent horror movie, you know, like it was such a shock and such a flashpoint moment. And, you know, still holds up.
I think that's fairly indisputable.
Yeah.
Like, as much effort as I just put into trying to find a way to dispute it, the facts speak for themselves.
Okay.
Both the box office and the awards.
Right. It was huge. Al, pick a movie. We just did our first 4. We got 8
Round
to go.
2.
Yeah, round 2. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do I go for what I like better or what? All right. I'm make sure this gets on there because it's one of the best movies of all time. And I'm going to say No Country for Old Men. This is, I think, my favorite movie of the century. And it is sort of it's got the iconography. Anton Chigurh again is a Halloween costume, and also a just citable archetype of, like, it was the Terminator in the 20th century, and you could say Anton Chigurh in the 21st century now, and mean the same thing. But also, it's sort of a perfect marriage of art house and down the middle thriller stuff. Like, it does the thriller stuff. I saw this opening night in a packed theater, and I have never. I mean, maybe like Jurassic Park in the theater when I was a kid, or like Avengers Endgame being packed like that. But even that, like, I don't know. And Endgame, the crowd went nuts, obviously, but this crowd was on a string, just being yanked this way and that way. That the atmosphere in that theater was unlike anything I've ever experienced.
I remember being shook at the end of this film. This film ends and you're just like, oh my God. Need a cup of coffee. Shit.
I mean, talking about the storytelling necessitating not taking the easy way out. It's like the only way that movie works is to just repeatedly just punch you in the face.
Well, at the end, it uses its softest touch at the end, and yet that is sort of the most scarring element of it, is the old man talking about his dream to close it out. You're just like, oh, fuck. Well, first, everybody's like, wait, that's it? You can't, like...
Yeah, right.
And that's what I mean, like, the art house thing. It's got... As much as it's got, you know, it's a Friday the 13th movie for 2 hours, and then you tack an art house ending on that, and that sounds like insufferable bullshit. But man, Tommy Lee Jones and the Coen brothers can sell me a lot of shit, a lot of bullshit without me pushing back on it.
It might be the best made film of the 21st century. I mean, just every single technical element of this thing is so just impressive and just stunning. Like every camera angle is the right one. Every choice, every piece of dialogue just feels like it was, you know, written on a tablet. It's just extraordinary craft, like overwhelming craft in this thing. You know, and it's so unpredictable, just as a narrative. I mean, you know, that sort of, you know, art house ending, as you say, is what balls to not even show what happens to Llewellyn. You know, you're kind of piecing it together. Just wait, what? He's dead. Yeah. It's
you wonder if they missed a reel somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't believe they pulled that off, and they do. Oh boy, do they ever! It's a hell of a film. Yeah, and yeah, Chigurh is just quite the character. You know, I mean the Fargo TV show, man. They just can't. They just keep trying to catch Chigurh, and as good as it is,
it's a thing across the entire Coen filmography. You know, going back to the Biker, the Apocalypse, and Raising Arizona, and you know, a half dozen other examples, but none of them are as pure or as towering as Anton Chigurh. Like it's a thing they'd been doing for 25 years, and then you know what, Cormac McCarthy was like, here, let me just this thing you've been pawing at for a while. Let me just serve you up the most perfect iteration of it possible, and just right over the plate, and they knock it so far out of the park.
Yeah.
I love that you picked this because the Coen brothers are probably top 3 favorite filmmakers ever, and that is my favorite Coen brothers film.
Oh wow.
But I didn't have it in my batch because I've worried that I feel like I don't hear people talking about it that much outside of film nerd circles.
Well, what are we but a film nerd circle?
Fair, yes.
I mean, but the conceit we're trying to step out a little outside of that, right? Or at least talk about what other film nerd circles are going to say. Yeah, and even in its day, it got overshadowed a bit by There Will Be Blood in terms of like awards and whatnot. But to me, this one has way more staying power than that, which is a towering performance with
did win Best Picture, Best Director,
shreds of a movie around it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, in zeitgeist terms, I don't know, like whatever. Somebody might be picking that soon. I don't know. But this one to me, yeah, it stands tall. And because there are certain things, there are shorthand things that pulling a No Country could mean either killing your protagonist too early or off screen, in shocking ways, the way like Psycho had done in previous centuries, or it could be this art house philosophical ending to a, very blood and guts, visceral thriller up to that point.
Yeah, the thriller elements of this, by the way, it's so easy to talk about the shocking like narrative turns and the creative decisions, but just the meat and potatoes, suspense thriller sequences are as good as anything in any Hitchcock film ever. Like, there's some of the best in the history of cinema. The scene in the motel, the crossing the border stuff. It's just unbelievably good.
I should probably also say, like, personally, I mean, this one of the few movies that I can, or works of art that I can cite with very high degree of specificity. Like, this affected my like personal philosophy of life.
Oh my!
It articulates things that I had thought that there are feelings that I had in a way that now it's the only way I think about this. I think not so much the final thing, but his Tommy Jones' final conversation with Barry Corbin, and talking about this, just that this country has always been hard on people, and it's not all waiting on you. That's vanity, and that affects this feeling I have of like, every generation thinking it's the last, and thinking that our times are so unprecedented and different. And it's like, no, I mean, things are different, but it doesn't mean the old days were better necessarily. And that is a thing that it's always coming up in my life, in my mind. And ever since this movie came out, that articulation of it is like the one that has overwritten however I would have said it prior.
Pretty grim. All right.
Well, it's not.
No, I don't mean that
the world is actually that black and empty. Just that it's just that you think the world's ending because it's changing, and that's because what you're used to is changing, and that's it's more vanity than it is clear-eyed estimation of the world. Anyway.
I like that. That's good. Okay, and yeah, I have been kind of struggling with that lately, as a matter of fact. So yeah, well said.
I think it happens when you have kids.
Yep. All right. Let's keep rolling here. Dan, your second pick is up.
My second pick. I almost made it my first pick, but here we are. Maybe one of my favorite movies of all time. I say maybe, but also possibly, definitely, Mad Max Fury Road, ladies and gentlemen. It is a perfect movie. It is the most watchable movie maybe that's ever been made, at least for me. Mm-hmm. Al knows this, but just a few weeks ago, I went and saw it back-to-back midnight showings at the Music Box Theater, both nights, because that's how much I love this movie. And each time I watched it, the audience was
one of those the black and white version?
One of them was the black, white, and chrome version.
Is that worth a damn? I mean, it's such a colorful film.
Yes, it's worth a damn as if you're like a Mad Max completionist who just wants to see all the different iterations. But I almost brought somebody to that for the first time because they did that one on Friday and then they were doing the other one on Saturday. And I was like, come with me Friday. And then they ended up coming Saturday, which was great. Because when I watched it on Friday, I was like, I'm so glad this was not someone's first. Because the color does so much work in that movie. Like, it's interesting because the black, white, and chrome is very bleak. It's black and white. So it is like, but you miss like there's greenery that has meaning in certain parts of the movie. And like, so when you're like cutting over the top of the pillars at the beginning of the movie and you don't see those little bits of greenery just to know that there is green in this world and it's being held away from these people who are down at the bottom and the dust and everything. So you lose a little bit. The blood is used very, so I would say if you've already seen Mad Max Fury Road, yes, go see the black, white, and chrome, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
Anyways, I love this movie so much. It was hard not to pick it in the first round. Maybe I should have, but like you said, it doesn't.
No, it's fine.
It's not like I'm making a list here, but my biggest fear was that it wouldn't be here. This would have been the one that I would, if somebody else had picked it, I would have been excited that it was there, but this is the one that I really wanted to have for my own.
I was pretty sure this was going to be here.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's the best action film of the eligible.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
it was just rated one of those bullshit. I think Rolling Stone rated it the #1 action movie of all time, and the rest of that list was nonsense. But I was like, I'll agree with that first one.
I would place The Raid over this in my personal action movie of the century rankings, but that's mostly because I am not into cars, and but also and I am into feet and fists and kicks and stuff. But but also it's like it seems there's an unspoken thing here that I could say I could have picked Spirited Away as a sort of uncontroversial classic, but it's from the year 2000 and a different country and animation. It's like it seems like aligning what we're trying to do here, which is what of major Hollywood products, what are going to be the ones that actually last.
I didn't say that. You could be a foreign film.
Okay.
Yeah, it was hard not to pick Spirited Away personally, and I have my reasons, but yeah.
Well, that's even like Lord of the Rings. I'm like, but is that too close to the turn of the century? Am I like almost picking a 90s movie if it was like filmed in 1999? Like, what do you think of it?
Well, we can discuss this when I pick Spirited Away in the next round. So.
Right. In regards to Fury Road, though, it's that and Get Out were sort of like two of the only examples I can think of in the last 10 years of just instantly sort of canonized in the way we're talking about.
Yeah. I think there's no question this film's getting viewed, 50 years.
And there's no like time. There's no, it's outside of our world. It's post-apocalyptic. I mean, it's, I guess, technically within our world, but it's like there's no time and a place for it. It's timeless. So no matter when you watch it, I think it's going to have staying power. And it's just such a brilliant, like, the idea that this movie is just like, they are trying to get from point A to point B, and that is the plot of the movie, and that is the story, and that is everything is driving in this direction in such a, like, powerful way that like just keeps you, no matter how many times I've seen that movie, I'm on the edge of my seat like, are they going to make it? And then they do make it, and then they have to go back the other way, and it's
but then they make a U-turn and go from point B back to point A.
And it's just like,
I mean, which is sort of like Joseph Campbell stuff, about
it's so
the hero returns home having changed type of thing.
Yeah, it's why George Miller is so like, he's like, I'm not going to overcomplicate. I don't need a bunch of twists. I don't need any of this. You just need like, I mean, his whole thing is he wants his movies to be able to be watched by foreign audiences who like, he's like, if you don't speak English, I want you to be able to watch this movie without subtitles and know what's going on. That's like it. And you could do, I've never tried it, but I've like thought about like, could you just watch this whole movie without sound and still know
that is a sort of defining feature of especially Hollywood movies of late recent times, but in a much more negative way than George Miller. Like that's such a purity in the visual expression he's doing here, as opposed to just standing down the edges and ironing out any regional eccentricities in the hopes that they can make a few more tens of millions from the Chinese market. Yeah.
Well, those eccentricities are kind of what gives this so much personality and verve, like all the.
Yeah, but they're not regional to the American South or anything. It's its own world. Like Dan was saying,
it's regional to Australian outback, I imagine. That's this sort of shit's going on down there, right?
I apologize to our friends in Australia. John thinks this is what your country is actually like.
They got a lot of skull masks and
There's
shit.
bullet farming is the number 2 force of the Australian economy.
There are some Australian Mad Max things that I didn't like when I first watched the Mad Max movies, and like they have these weird nicknames for everything. And I'm like, oh, that's so weird. And then like you find out in Australia, they really call like electricians are called Sparkies. And like that is kind of But
It's just the way they talk.
yeah,
over there.
it's like this great little like I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's like,
I have some nerves, and this is getting away from our prompt, but there's going to be a Furiosa movie,
Sure.
and I'm just so scared that it's going to
I'm trepidatious.
somehow
Yeah. Mhm.
damage my feelings about Fury Road.
I think it's
I've
too
never
good.
felt good or excited about a prequel coming.
Yeah.
I mean, not since Phantom Menace, like when I was a child.
I watched the. Have
But
you seen
now
the
it's like
trailer?
every time it's like, yeah, I mean, it looks like the look of it's fine, but I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. But how about you start the story where it's good, and if it was good before, maybe do the Furious movie first. I don't know. Like, I guess you can't do that if it's Mad Max is the selling point. But
Sure.
whatever. I don't like prequels. I don't feel like that. I mean, you guys can veto that opinion if you want, but I don't think it's that controversial. And nobody's gonna waste a veto on Fury Road.
Oh no! It's obviously belongs here, and
Yeah.
I love that. Besides just being the best action film with some of the most incredible eye-popping design, like there was no need for this film to have thematic concerns, but it does. It's about something. It has this just a great sort of like angry college kid liberalism to it. The feminism is in your face, but it is integrated into the story perfectly. I think even better is the toxic masculinity stuff, which has maybe never been better presented in film, than the war boys in this. It's just a wild extrapolation of shitty boy beliefs and to this weird cult of bald marauders just trying to murder themselves.
And again,
to be the biggest man, it's so great.
And if we're doing this, performances of the century, I mean, Furiosa is the performance here. Like, it's the achievement that she just sort of wrestles the movie away from the titular star as much as she does. And that is both a feat of writing and performance. But I think it gets really, Nicholas Holt's performance gets really undersold and how important it is to this movie and how much it adds to this. He is so. I mean, that guy's great. He gets undersold. He is the next new generation Sam Rockwell. He's somebody that we just culturally seem to really undervalue, even though we use him constantly.
Not me.
No, not you. Of course, you're one of the good ones. You appreciated Get Out.
I've been watching so much of The Great lately, so I'm like deep in Nicholas Holt mind.
That's a really good example of almost like he wrestles that show away from the titular star. But with this incredible, performance, but in a way that is detrimental to the overall product. I think that it ends up hurting the show, even though, like, I understand exactly why they don't want to get rid of him for so long. Furiosa steals the movie from Mad Max, and yet the movie does not suffer for that slightly.
Yeah,
not even a little.
All right, great film.
Has anyone made it a about a war boy sketch yet? Has SNL done that? Can I have that? Isn't he the kid from About a Boy?
He was.
Yeah, you gotta. Yeah,
that's pretty good.
Okay, I'll write that.
Has he not hosted Saturday Night Live?
I don't think so.
Oh, he should.
Oh my God, they put him on here. He's going to be one of those revelation hosts. I swear, like The Rock
like
or
Driver.
Timberlake or whatever. You're like, yeah. Driver's so Sorry, that's a total different subject. I can't. It's so weird how they work two drivers' strengths in a way they don't with any other host. But anyway,
yeah. Okay. We're moving on. We're moving on. Gwen.
We're moving on. Okay. Sorry. I'd like to go on the record and say, fuck you, John, for making it 3 and not 7.
That's the thing. Yeah.
I can do this.
Triage.
I can do this. All right. I'm going Mulholland Drive.
Ooh, cool.
Ooh, okay. This is the thing. I had to look up, is this 1999 or is this 2000? And it's 2001, actually.
Yeah.
2001.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to use a veto just because nobody has. But I would be like,
you're not doing on this.
Is this a 21st century movie?
Well, yes.
You know what? And if I do it though, you'll probably turn around and just throw Twin Peaks: The Return at me just out of spite. So I can't risk that.
I would never. But no, I was trying to think about movies that like maybe couldn't have been made in the 20th century, but and I feel like Lynch is Lynch forever. I don't necessarily, he's like outside of time a little bit.
There's an 80s-ness to him that I think predates the 80s even. But
yeah,
but it has some 50s in it too.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. But very much like the way the 80s, the culture of the 80s was actively trying to get back to the 50s is what he's sort of satirizing all the time.
And we're now trying to get back to the 80s. Yes.
Right. Yeah. I didn't think that this was as heralded a film as it is in my heart until I was going through all these lists, and it's on all of them. So I'm like, okay, it's going to stand the test of time. And there's absolutely nothing like it except for maybe other Lynch. But I would say of all the Lynch that goes to such strange places, it is probably the most accessible. And it's sunk into my being in a way that like a lot of films had never had. And I think it gets its claws in you. I think it's extraordinary.
But I might almost cite its inaccessibility as the greater strength to it.
It's greater strength. Sure. Yeah.
Well, in a way that even in an era of explainer videos, where you can type Mulholland Drive into YouTube and get like just 24 3-hour videos explaining every bit, like why the vacuum salesman is what he is or whatever. But this movie seems to retain an era of mystery even in the internet culture that came up afterwards. I think that is to its credit.
Right. And I think that's also because it does such a great job of making the mystery very, very mysterious, but also you feel like there is an answer that you could climb to if you just study it enough, you know?
Well, I think it invites you to kind of find your own definition for what you're seeing. You know, like you are invited to kind of have your own opinion of this in a way most movies do not allow you to do. Because if you're not really tethered to a plot necessarily in this. There's stuff that happens. You're just like, I'm not entirely sure why that happened. Or scenes like that scene near the beginning with the man behind the
diner scene
which is like one of the scariest film scenes in any movie. And you could probably take out and no one would miss it because it has nothing to do with a lot of the stuff in it. But I would never, because it's
that's what gives it sticking power, though. And that goes back to what we're talking about with No Country and just the filmmaking and the visceral nature of it. Because this could just be total abstract nonsense if it couldn't hit you in the gut that hard when he wants to, and he doesn't have to do that again that many times or anything. It's just like once that's out there, that guy's now metaphorically behind every dumpster in every scene. You know?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I can't even put words to exactly how viscerally it affects me anyway, watching it. And again, you have incredible performances. It manages to be terrifying and also really funny and just so strange. I love it.
Why didn't Naomi Watts become the biggest star in Hollywood? Is my question after seeing this.
That's the Rushmore performance here.
And she totally follows up on it when anyone gives her a role after this. She kind of nails it. Like the Peter Jackson King Kong.
She's never been
her big, her biggest swing at being a huge movie star. She's excellent in that movie. She's the best thing in that movie. She has the goods. Yeah.
Yeah. I know that she went through some health things, I think, which is part of why.
Oh, okay. That happens, I suppose. Sure.
Not just the movie Australia.
That's called Kidman, isn't it?
That's a thing that happened. Wait, is it?
It's Kidman.
Son of a bitch. Yeah, all right. Strike it from the record.
But it could have been her.
Did she do?
Her.
Watson Kidman.
I thought she did a big historical epic at some point.
She might have done.
Flopped. But...
Might have done. It's not ringing a bell right now, but I don't know. She may have done some bad. She's in the Book of Henry. I mean, there's some bad choices made, but like whatever. It's a performance for the ages in Mulholland Drive. No question about that. Oh man, there's other stuff in this that really sticks out. Like Club Silencio, that I'm just never going to forget.
Never.
It's a weird Mobius strip of a film too. It's I kind of feel like you could kind of just start it at any point, get to the end, keep watching from the beginning to the point where you start, and it would be the same experience in a way. It's a true piece of art house filmmaking here. That
doesn't seem to be something Lynch is consciously after, even like because Lost Highway is sort of seems like it's going for that similar thing that you're talking about, the Mobius strip quality. But nobody is going to say Lost Highway is a more successful iteration.
No,
of even it's doing a lot of the same stuff.
Still
as this
pretty
one.
cool.
This is Lynch's best movie, right? We're all in agreement there.
Yeah, it's certainly in contention
Probably.
with Blue Velvet, maybe being really.
I love Blue Velvet a lot. I like it more than Inland Empire, I can say.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or
Blue Velvet's great, but I think
I don't like Eraserhead that much. It's good, but I don't like it. I think Fire Walk with Me is right up there. Terrifying. Yeah.
Well, talking about Mobius strip, I think I may have mentioned this to you before, John, but I saw Firework with Me in probably the most effective way possible, which was just being 10 years old at staying the night at my friend's house and turning on HBO at 10:30, and it's like halfway through it, and it's like, what the living fuck is any of this? It's just horrifying and scarring.
Mm-hmm.
And then, finding out that I didn't even know what that movie was. I didn't know the name of it, anything. It was just that fucked up movie I saw at Mark's house. And until I was an adult and watched the Twin Peaks movie and saw somebody like, oh, I recognize these people. That was a Twin Peaks thing?
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to see that. Yeah.
The scars went deep.
He's the master of the dream movie, right? Like that's what he does better than anyone. And yeah, Mulholland Drive is probably the best dream-like film that he's made too, which
certainly
makes it a strong argument for it being the best Lynch movie. Yeah, good call. Like that one. All right. Shall we move on? I've got I think probably should. Okay, I will make my second pick, and I'm just going to bite the bullet. It's time to pick The Dark Knight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. This is the superhero film, I believe. Now there's others that are quite good, of course. I think you could quibble with what the best one is, what your favorite is, but this is the one of note. This obviously
it's the respectable one too.
Well, yes. But I think it's also an exceptional movie in its own right. Like this is a great film.
Yeah.
And it kind of does more with the genre than any other one, I believe. This is the one that requires the least kind of commitment or prior knowledge or relationship with the characters to work, which, I mean, everyone kind of has that with the Batman and Joker. But beyond that, I think it just as a piece unto itself, it kind of does all the things I want a superhero film to do and then some. It has ideas about why these characters are important culturally, why we keep returning to them, the sort of the ideas they represent beyond just, they're the specifics of their characters, order and chaos, and it certainly has more direct war on terror kind of considerations than most of these movies would attempt. And it's just wildly entertaining and features, one of the greatest performances of all time in it, and many other good performances too. I think there could be another superhero film on this list, but this is the one I think stands for all.
I can't really argue with that. Yeah. I also, if you use the criteria that I was trying to say, like, how does it represent the 20th century? Like, that is, Heath Ledger is the 20th century version of the Joker.
21st century.
And that, did I say 21st?
Yeah, you said 20th.
I meant to say 21st.
Yeah.
The 21st century version of the Joker. Like,
he's entropy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it sort of started a trend of, to be fair, the Star Wars prequels, I guess, were doing this, but like trying to understand villains more that I think is like a really big trend in the past 20 years.
Mhm.
I think the love affair with villains came from loving the Joker and Heath Ledger being perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I would trace that back to The Sopranos, probably getting that ball rolling in a way in the 21st century. I guess stretching back to the 20th century. But even that's more of an, I guess, maybe if you want to draw a distinction between anti-hero and villain, because the Joker's not an anti-hero in this movie. He's a villain.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is one, it's also kind of undeniable. It changed the Academy Awards rules.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the silliest way, I think. But
sure.
And every scene is good. It's one of those movies where it's like you can like break it down into like, I don't know, however many different scenes there are, and each one is like perfect in its own way, and then it all works together. It's one of those, if cable was still a thing, The Dark Knight would be on 24/7.
All the time.
It would just be running any state, TNT running some edited version that sucks because it probably cuts out a bunch of the best parts, but like still, like there would be kids being raised on this movie because it was just on all the time. Now we don't have that anymore, so we have to go and seek it out.
Probably still happening though. Yeah, people are just showing it to the kids.
It's out there.
Yeah.
Al, is that what Claire watches before she after Frozen? Before she goes to bed to see Dark Knight?
No, I talked about not trying to figure out when it's okay to show this movie to my stepson Liam, who's old enough that he's starting to see some R-rated movies, but there's a bunch of R-rated movies that I would show to him more comfortably than this PG-13 movie.
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Yes. Rated R.
Yes, we have watched that one. But going away what you're saying about that being a cable movie by nature, if nothing else, it does feel like not a lot of direct comparisons between this and like the Shawshank Redemption, but part of the reason why Shawshank became the ultimate cable movie is that it's so episodic and that you can just drop in for a scene here or there, and it kind of doesn't matter that much. And The Dark Knight has a much more driving narrative to it, but also just the individual scene work is so good that you can watch individual scenes out of order, and it just like they're also gripping and just wildly entertaining. That it's hard to turn away from it.
Yeah. It never dips. There's no like part, like there's so many movies that like first 2/3 are the greatest movie ever made, and then the final 2/3 are just like, or final third is like, well, I guess they had to do something. I just won't watch that part. But this movie,
the last half hour is nobody's favorite part of Dark Knight.
I like it. I like the boat thing. I like the tiny Lister stuff. He's good.
Yeah, I think it all works.
He's great.
Yeah.
He's super.
But the final two-faced confrontation, that's
sure.
I'd still watch it. I'd still like.
Well, and I think it brings it around because the actual final scene and closing, like cut to black, is really strong with the music and then Oldman doing the voiceover.
And I remember seeing this movie in the theater, midnight, going and just like watching it and just being like shit, everything is going to be different after this. Again, like not like the world, but just like movie making. Like as a kid who liked comic books and liked the original Batmans, and even kind of I don't even know that I even saw Batman Begins. I wasn't very excited about it. I loved the Burton Batmans so much that I was like, and again, I was like, I don't know, 18 at this point, so like picky. And then watched Dark Knight, and I was like, everything sucked before this. Everything was not that extreme, but just like that you could do this, that you could like, and that's something like I wonder if that will be lost to future generations. The fact that this was like not just a great movie, but an influential movie. Like same thing about like Citizen Kane, where it's like people, you watch Citizen Kane now and people are like, why is this such a classic? It's like, well, because you don't know that the things that were done before that weren't done.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the ways that The Dark Knight is influential are more, I don't know, closer to the surface than the like, camera tricks that Citizen Kane innovated. That we have more lay people, we have more language for, just the way the villains are presented and just talking about dark superhero movies and all that. Okay, obviously nobody's going to veto Dark Knight. I got one that I can tie to it.
I got to say one thing before Chicago movie. That's it.
It's a great Chicago movie, despite being set in Gotham.
Yeah, that's fine. You see Benny's in the background.
Exactly. But okay, let me tie this to my next pick, which will be a veto bait for you guys.
Okay.
I've thought about this, and so I'm going to say Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame as a unit Endgame, if you wanted me to pick one. I think these movies are going to survive, if not necessarily as objects of reverence, but in terms of influence. Like, the Endgame will continue to be a touchstone that you can point to for decades to come. As
Endgame,
in a way that
okay,
yes, Endgame specifically, in a way this ties to The Dark Knight is, or Lord of the Rings is, in a way of, they did this thing this big difficult thing so successfully once that everybody then chased it
right.
for 20 more years, even though nobody ever actually managed to do it to do it again. But with Lord of the Rings, it's like we had a boom of high fantasy blockbusters that none of them. I mean, Harry Potter being the sort of exception.
That's a different deal. Yeah.
And the idea of we'll film multiple movies at once and it'll be great. And that never works again like it does with Lord of the Rings. And doing, high fantasy stuff again. There's a whole boom after in the 10 years after that none of it ever sniffs the level of respectability, Academy Awards stuff, whatever you want to call it, that does. With Dark Knight, it's so good at being essentially a dark, hard R superhero movie, even though it's a PG-13 movie, that we cannot get rid of the hard R superhero movie as a thing that people are going to keep trying to do, even though it never seems to work anymore. And with Infinity War and Endgame, it is the entire cinematic universe concept that has never worked for anybody but Marvel. But there's this one proof point that is way too big and successful to ignore that, but you'll hear people saying this movie down the line, that's going to be our Endgame.
Mm-hmm.
And
even
people
Marvel
keep chasing that brass ring.
Even
though
Marvel
it's never going to work.
is failing to do that.
Marvel
now.
itself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
So use your veto if you must, but I think that's going to be one of the superhero movies that lives on.
Wait, did you just stealthily pick
or worse.
Endgame for your movie? Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
With an explicit dare to veto it.
I
can go and pick something else.
I don't know if I will, but I want to. Part of me feels like the whole Marvel universe is going to, in 20 years, everyone's going to be like a dream that we all collectively had. Did that all happen?
But
did we all go and
for
see
15, 20 years? Dreams it's
and made some of the most money at box offices ever.
Yeah, ever.
I like Endgame, and I'm still just like,
I love Endgame.
This is a well-reasoned argument, though, Al. This is yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just don't.
It's specifically about the whole we're going to tie it all together, baby, and it's all going to pay off in the end, and somehow it actually did in that case.
Yeah.
They pull it off. They do. It's kind of remarkable just outside of quality almost, well, I mean, quality is necessary. It wouldn't work if it wasn't well done. It wasn't satisfying in that regard. Every choice they make in those is the right one, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah. But to the point, I hear the note of resentment in your voice.
Yes,
it's like,
yes,
you do in fact have to give it to them, which is kind of infuriating to film buffs. But I think maybe as we get away from that, and maybe as the Marvel universe itself collapses, we'll get away with it. It will become more useful to film nerds as a cudgel for saying why the new version sucks. It's it's no Endgame.
Yeah, the real bad taste in my mouth is when you tried to tie in Infinity War, which I think is a terrible film.
No, I like Infinity War.
The only the only reason why I tied that in really is because currently it feels like that one gets a little more respect from the pointy-headed film nerds than Endgame does. And maybe that's just two people I talk to, but
well, Endgame, I mean, look, here's the thing. I have strong memories of in the pandemic, in the when we couldn't go to theaters, I would go online on YouTube and I would watch audiences reacting to Endgame and nostalgically wish we had theaters again. I mean, that happened multiple times. I was just like, let's see. Oh, I want to see them clap when when Iron Man snaps his fingers. I would watch the end credit scene where they do their little curtain call thing and see audiences cheering for their favorite Avengers, and it ends with Robert Downey Jr. and that is the biggest one. And it's just that is, I mean, it's sort of undeniably one of the huge appeals of cinema, that this communal experience where everyone's kind of rooting for a thing. I mean, this is what Lord of the Rings did and nobody else did until fucking Endgame. It had this sort of amazing ability to pull that off beyond just the beyond just being good. It kind of did this thing that was more. It was somehow more than the sum of its parts by the end there, and everyone felt it.
Darkly, if Martin Scorsese is right about everything, it could end up standing as a marker for like the end of the theatrical experience, the end of an era.
The real end game, yes.
If theaters never fully recover from COVID and that just kind of gives way to streaming, it seems like a possibility, then this will stand as the last big one, the last big theater experience. Be the Altamont of the theater experience.
Jesus. I can't veto this.
I was down on seeing this might, and I think this colors my not even my opinion of the Marvel movies, but my I feel like I have less excitement about them than some people. Like I appreciate them and I have watched them, but I watched all of them on a couch. I only saw one Marvel movie in the theater, and that was Thor: Dark World, and it was the first one. I didn't really know much. I went with friends. I didn't know it was a sequel. And then the rest of them I watched just on a couch, and I think it does heavily affect. I think it's part of the reason that I'm like, oh yeah, these are good, but I never quite had the level of really being excited about the next one coming out, or really and I think it would have been much different if I had the experience that you're talking about of being in the theater and everyone is cheering and it's this shared experience. And I think I would walk out of it probably so jazzed and just more excited. And I think I don't know. I think
there is a few of them that really did theater work. The first Avengers, Endgame, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Black Panther. All those were theatrical experiences. And look, Black Panther is the easier choice here than Endgame. It's more obviously a big cultural thing that's going to stick around, and Wakanda is its own thing. But I don't know. I felt like we needed somebody to make a leap here, to take a stretch of something less obvious.
Dark Knight, but yeah, okay.
Well, somebody needed to make a more specious argument. So this is my one
too.
Yeah, it works. It works. It worked anyway, and yeah. I mean, I think people will continue to watch that film, obviously, and yeah.
But will it be?
It's kind of a stand-in for the whole Marvel universe. What?
Be on Turner Classic Movies, the idea of a quote unquote classic.
Well, no, because Disney's not going to let it be on anything but Disney classic movies. Jill, that's a different topic. For purely business reasons, it will not.
And Turner Classic Movies will not exist in 5 years as well.
But it will be something that I think, I'm sorry, 40 years from now, I do think you'll be able to cite it and as a stand-in for the entire Marvel thing and for the entire cinematic universe thing. And that's the crux of my thesis here.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Veto me, you cowards.
I can't. Your argument is sound. Yeah.
I mean,
man, I was kind of counting on sneaking my way into a fourth pick.
I know there's a benefit to the veto because you get to talk about 4 movies.
Yeah.
But fine, I blew it. Okay, fine, Dan, you're up.
Okay, speaking of vetoes, I am going to pick a movie that you did say you were going to veto, but it was going to be my pick. I didn't change it. This was 100% going to be the 3 movies I chose, and that is Spirited Away.
Oh, no shit.
And so when you were talking about it, I was like, and I said, we can discuss it when I pick a next round. I was not kidding. That is the movie. So am I getting a veto before I get too deep into it?
Well, I mean, you're not wrong. It's going to be on Turner Classic Movies.
Yeah.
If that is the standard, then absolutely. But sure, you know what? Nobody's used a veto yet, and I want to hear what your fourth pick is anyway. So yeah, sure, I'll veto that one.
I want to talk about Spirited Away. Okay, God.
Oh, okay, fine.
Briefly. It's
fine. We'll open the floor to a filibuster here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, can we make the argument?
I mean, as far as in my movie, the movies, I think the 3 that I chose, the theme is timelessness, and all 3 of these movies feel like they're in this timeless kind of world. I think Spirited Away is part of it is just, it's a beautiful movie. It is an incredible story. It is an incredibly watchable movie. The plot is here and there. You know, it's like one of these movies. It's not like complicated. It's a very incredibly simple story. It's very progressive. You know, there's nothing about it you watch and you're like, oh, this was made in 2000. You know, it's not, you know, thing. It just is. It is. I love this movie. And if I don't know if we're talking about the dubbed version or the subtitle version, do I have to pick individually? Because I'm just going to pick both of them. I think they're both. Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Great. Because if you vetoed, I was just going to pick the other.
They tend to be the only movies that have good dubbings that I've like consistently. Miyazaki movies, the Americanization versions are always better than I expect them to be.
Yeah. Well, and Spirited Away, because Lasseter was the Disney guy, had a big part of bringing it over, and they really took the great John Lasseter dubbing seriously. They went through the Disney program, and I think it is because we saw it. I brought Meg to watch it at the Music Box. I think third plug for the Music Box in this podcast. Sorry, but they and we watched the subtitled version, and it was hard because it's such a beautiful movie. And Meg mentioned she's spending most of the time watching the bottom third of the screen, so I feel like it is one of these where it does feel like you're losing a little bit, even though mostly I would much rather a subtitled movie than a dubbed movie. But in some animation, it's like you don't want to be worrying about you want to watch what's going on in every corner of the screen.
The animation is stunning in that film.
Yeah, it's the way he can make things like really, really grotesque and gross and also so beautiful. Just what a genius.
Yeah.
I watched that movie and I'm not entirely sure why. But I'm like on the verge of tears almost the entire time. Like I and it's not even something sad happening. I'm just sort of just openly emotional experiencing it in a way that is hard to explain. I think if I had to, I would say it's just like this movie gets childhood in a way almost no other film does. Like,
yeah,
I feel, like dragged back to being 9-10 years old watching this thing, and in just sort of this magical alchemical way. You're perceiving things as a child does watching this movie, and it is visceral and almost upsetting. Like, it's sort of and that's like the plot, like you say, it's kind of hard to make sense of in a lot of ways, and I feel there's probably a little bit of a cultural reason for that, but not really. I think ultimately what's going on is you just there's I don't know. I'm being dragged back into seeing the world differently and not understanding things, and yet kind of getting a sense of them at the same time, in a way that it feels magical and new and stunning and a little bit threatening, and it's a powerful experience. I don't even know why. Like why is it? Why am I so overwhelmed when the guy remembers he's a river? I am, though. I'm blown over. I just have to take a moment.
Because it's the most beautiful thing in the world. That's why.
Yeah, I guess
it's a weird way. It's the kids' version of Mulholland Drive.
Basically,
it takes you to this weird place that it's very hard to articulate, like why you're having the reactions you are, but the reaction's sort of undeniable and alchemical.
I just saw Boy and the Heron this week, by the way. It's really good.
I'm very excited.
This is one of the best he's done in ever. I think it's one near the top of his list. It reminded me of Spirited Away a lot. It doesn't reach that height, but it's that kind of thing. It's really good. It's really good. Also has Wario kind of stuff in it too, which is very interesting.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry, Wario as in it's a me Wario?
Yeah. There's Wario vibes all over it. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, it's an hour and a half and we don't have time to unpack what that could possibly mean.
You'll know it when you see it. Okay.
So are we vetoing this because it's too
No.
It's I mean, the only reason I didn't have it on my list is because I again, going back to my like, could it have been made in the 20th century? And it does feel so much of a kind of everything he does.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of I feel like it also much like kind of like Endgame just represents the entire Marvel project. Any Miyazaki movie stands in for all like Studio Ghibli. Like that's I mean, this is the best one, I think, by consensus.
Yeah.
But you kind of you spiritually you get My Neighbor Totoro along with it too and all that. So sure.
Yeah, it's represented. I think there's a representation.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have an animation too. I'm like some of these, like, especially when you're talking about what movies stand the test of time, like going back to like what movies we're still watching from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, animations tend to have a
Kids
timeless,
movies, yeah. But also part of the defining characteristic of the era we're talking about is that the movies for adults are all based on source material from kids' movies, kids' stories. So
It's true.
Good stuff.
in a way, I mean, we have Batman and Thor and Captain America all represented already. But
Yeah.
I wish I'd vetoed Endgame. I'll tell you right now.
Wait, is it too late to veto Endgame?
I think it's too late. Yeah, I think we
No,
let it
veto
stand.
Endgame. Veto Endgame.
Oh, I
veto
thought I could
Endgame.
hear all the options and then decide.
No.
Oh, well, when
You can
Dan
still-
made his pick, I think the floor closed.
Exactly. You can veto Spirited Away, and that's
Got
it at
it.
this point. Yeah.
Got it.
mhm.
Oh well,
Yeah.
that's sad.
Yeah.
Well,
All right, you got to make your last pick now, Gwen.
well, here's the thing. I'm really, really torn between animated and not right now.
Right? Did Spirited Away throw a wrench in that, kind of?
No.
Okay.
No. I will save that for my honorable mention that you're gonna let me do later if nobody else can.
For sure.
I will pick for number 3, Brokeback Mountain.
Oh, cool. Good. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Ang Lee is a genius. It's 2 gorgeous lead performances and some really, really gorgeous supporting performances. And yeah, I would say that it was kind of a turning point culturally, and it's just a devastatingly beautiful film. And devastating, just sad.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
is.
I just
It
watched
is a
that
very good
movie for the
movie.
first time about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Oh.
Yeah, how was it?
It was interesting because it's something that for me, it's like I've heard about it for so long. It was so popular when it came out, controversial because of the world that we lived in at that time,
And still.
and it's still, even what it represents. Yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
not that we've evolved as a society as much as we should. So it was interesting, and it was better. I think I think because of the hype, it had almost started to, it was like, oh, well, this will be fine.
Yeah.
This will be good. We watched it because me and Meg watched every MTV Movie Award Best Kiss winner from 1991 till present. And
That's
so
so
that
great.
is, which I think is the weirdest way for me to finally watch it's Brokeback Mountain and Moonlight were the 2 good movies that were actually in there. Both fantastic films.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Randy Quaid completionist might be the weirder way, but otherwise, yes.
Didn't you also watch Wild at Heart with Christian Slater? You said there's only 2 good movies that you watched?
Oh yeah, Wild at Heart. Untamed Heart.
Untamed Heart. That's
Wild at Heart is
totally different.
David Lynchian.
Notebook did win
is a
Best
good
Kiss.
movie.
Yeah.
I'm not putting it on my
Is it-
top 3, but
Is that your honorable mention? Okay.
no.
Notebook was a great movie until the last 10 minutes, and then I got really mad at it.
But I found an angle of attack here for a potential veto of this.
Go for it. Yeah.
Is there an argument that the Notebook deserved this spot more
The
than
Notebook?
Brokeback Mountain?
No.
As the
Absolutely
Notebook-
not.
No. What are you
No,
talking
no,
about?
Because
not even
in terms of
similar
cultural
themes.
No.
in terms of cultural penetration.
It was popular, yes, but no.
You don't
The
need
thing
to
about Brokeback Mountain
that movie.
is that it's a very famous movie that nobody really watches.
I disagree.
Is
Well,
what
I
does.
just watched
sad.
it.
I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not it's not one you want to go back to in the way you want to go back to the Notebook. Don't get me wrong, Notebook is a tearjerker, but I would say the Brokeback Mountain is really hard to watch because it's such
Right.
authentic pain.
Mhm.
It's
And
But is that
It's gutting. When
Does
he
that-
goes
does
back, when
that-
he's at the house of
Oh.
the dad and or the parents and
Yeah.
the mom knows, and it's all unspoken. It's all just very
so much is happening.
oh boy.
The way everyone
there's no
knows,
moment in
the way
Notebook
everyone
like
knows
that.
and doesn't want to articulate it. It's so incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that strikes me about that movie is it's such a the Heath Ledger character. I mean, he's so good in that film. The way he is framed and used in that movie. Like there's that scene when he beats the shit out of that bully at the 4th of July celebration. He's kind of framed against the fireworks in the sky, sort of American hero style. And yet this sort of, I mean, what always strikes me is that the world they live in is not, not allowing of him to be who he wants to be. But Jack Twist is, he authentically goes for it. Yeah. Does that make him the braver? Does that make him the more, but then he dies as a result of it. He's killed because of that. And, it's so much to take on and so much to deal with. Like, is it cowardice that he's not living his authentic self, or is it, he just doesn't have the room to do it, or he will be killed? Like, it is a powerful, upsetting film. It makes you think about the larger stuff that it is bringing up, but it is also so specific for these human characters that are at its center. Brilliant performances. And I think it's the best romance of the 21st century. I think it was on my list too. Yeah.
I mean, I might disagree with that. I think Eternal Sunshine might be it, but
that one speaks more directly to me.
Yeah. But
right,
as
and
drama,
I think specifically that the drama is there, but I think it's so much also a movie about the repression of toxic masculinity, and so like the romance never gets to like unlock.
Yeah,
it just does. It's just these tiny moments that they get to have together, and even when they have those moments together, it still feels like clenched and held back. And I don't know if there's anything else that came out in the past 20 years that sort of unlocked the ability for people to see gay people, as everyday people, as maybe even cowboys, and I think it changed a lot culturally for everyone because they were so believable in their performances of that repressed longing.
Yeah. Well, it did. It was hugely influential on a cultural level that a lot of these other movies don't even touch, that exists outside of movies. The argument, I guess, or why like the Notebook might be the romance that goes over that is just because that is the one people rewatch so much. And does this movie get remembered for the movie or for the cultural impact it made? And because it's like you said, it's so punishing to watch. I mean, it's sort of a prerequisite that people will continually revisit it over and over time for it to reach the level we're talking about decades down the line.
I would just say the filmmaking is far superior. Ang Lee is.
Yeah, I mean that's the bottom line for me.
Safe.
Yeah,
that's it.
It's a really well made movie.
But if it lacks rewatchability,
yeah. But I'm not going to argue that the Notebook deserves a place in the annals of history. Like there's a reason people go back to it.
Mm-hmm. I think it has. That's a movie I've never seen, but I'm familiar with the iconography of it, nonetheless.
Well, rewatchability.
I think that means a lot in this context.
Rewatchability. I mean, is 2001 a particularly rewatchable film? No.
I mean, yeah. Well,
you can.
It was decades ago.
Yeah, I guess. Okay, but
yeah, you just did. You vary the level of how high you are, and
anything's watchable if you're high.
It is a seismic experience, though, to watch. 2001, like it changes you in a way, and I think Brokeback does that, and so I think this is a good choice, personally.
Yeah. Another example of people have cite is like Requiem for a Dream as a sort of powerhouse experience, but also one that I don't think that movie has a lot of staying power decades down the line because everybody watches it once and no one watches it twice.
But I would say like you watch it once and you're never going to forget it ever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's some horror movies that are that way too.
Yeah.
Like,
fair. Yeah.
I think I would rewatch Brokeback Mountain before Requiem for a Dream. I absolutely would never. But I could see absolutely, like, again, if this were cable were a thing and I was flipping through and Brokeback was on, I think I would at least watch some of it because the performances are so good. There's like this appreciation and the filmmaking, and it looks beautiful, and it's like there's so much, and it's a hard watch because of the subject matter and because of the way that the story plays out. but not as hard of a watch of Requiem for a Dream, where it's like every frame of this is attacking my soul, and I need to like, it's overwhelming. So, yeah, it's a great choice. It was on my short list. But.
All right.
All
Shall I
right.
finish that?
We've only got one
Number
left.
12? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to pick my favorite film of the last 24 years, and that is Inglourious Bastards.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This one didn't quite make it for me because I felt like I was just valuing like personal favorites over what the rest of the world might think.
I might be doing that. I think the argument could be made that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood will be the remembered Tarantino film, or even Django Unchained, I think, has some cultural punch and staying power and sort of just ideas that seem like very, very, appealing and popular. But I just think Inglourious Bastards is such a exceptional piece of filmmaking, and I think that will have to be kind of dealt with and acknowledged. And I mean, we did a whole episode on it, and I tried to get into it there, but I just what he actually pulls off in this, and I don't think he's a really big theme guy, Tarantino. I think he's all about characters and plot and movie moments and stuff like that. But I think this kind of articulates really, really well the importance of film. And how important and significant it is in sort of defining how we think about ourselves and about history. The ultimate triumph of movies over Hitler is kind of what it's about. And, and also just moment to moment, wildly entertaining. Great performances, great dialogue, extraordinary sequences. But then where it ultimately lands, was like it defeats actual history itself in a way. It overwrites the actual ending of Hitler with a more cinematic, more appealing version, and that's sort of the point. Is that he has now been completely defined by our art and entertainment about him, and that's great. That's so cool. It's the power of cinema. Yeah.
And it feels like it's a well that Tarantino has gone back to subsequently to diminishing returns.
He does a similar thing in Once
But it is
Upon a Time.
also a type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. But it's definitely a thing you can refer to, pulling an Inglourious Bastards now. That's a thing that means something specific about overwriting history in that audacious way. And, one thing I don't think we talked about when we did a whole episode on it, but, kind of relating to what I mentioned earlier about Get Out, is that there's perhaps a defining era of this, or a defining trait of this era is going to be a softening of things in a well-intentioned way that maybe, there's a tension between when you're doing historical material, especially things that are taking on historical injustice, and you want to, reframe that so that the people that were, the marginalized at the time are the center frame heroes. And there's always going to be a tension there about, whether it's Green Book or whatever, of to what extent are we presenting something aspirational versus just like rewriting history to make it more palatable to our modern sensibilities. And Inglourious Bastards kind of, in a satirical way, just like has that, it does that so brazenly.
Yeah.
That it's like, we want just the better movie ending to this, that it kind of elides that entire tension in a weird way. And
it's cheeky,
depending on how
that's that it works.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And maybe it sort of like preemptively satirizes a whole, another decade or two of historical movies that would indulge similar impulses, but in less honest ways, I guess, is one way of getting at that. But it's also just wildly entertaining movie.
Yeah,
and Christoph Waltz's performance is one of the best of the
For sure.
millennium, obviously.
For sure. I mean, the fact that the third act of this movie is based around like, well, we're going to kill Hitler. And you, in your head, you're like, well, they don't do it.
Exactly.
They're not going to succeed. I know what happens to
but
Hitler. So how's it going to go wrong? And that's the tension of it. And then it's like, no, they do it. They fucking do it. It's so great.
I watched this movie with my grandma and my family on Christmas Day, and we had our own version of a Marvel experience, like theater experience, because we're watching it. And like, we have the tension of like, well, what is this? And also the tension of we are subjecting a 70-year-old woman to this movie, and is she enjoying it?
Yeah.
And it got to the point where they're killing Hitler. And my grandma's like, hooting and hollering for and we're just like, because none of us were all like, oh, how's it going to get out and all that. So and up until I was not familiar. I mean, there's obviously like speculative historical fiction, whatever they call it, in literature somewhat, but like in movies, you just hadn't seen that. You hadn't seen like, we're going to take a historical thing and just completely change it to the way that you want to see it. So it was like a twist. It was like a Sixth Sense level twist of just like,
Well, it wasn't even like the Royal Tenenbaums thing of like, usually that alternate history stuff is like what this movie presupposes is what if he did that? Like usually that's up front in the premise, and here it's the climax only is where it diverges.
Yeah.
And because of that, it's this just unique climax. Like, no other movies just don't have that type of release. And it's, again, other movies didn't before, and they can't really after, because now we know it can be done.
Yeah, he runs up against that in all his post. I guess not Hateful Eight, but everything else he's done is kind of a riff on this idea. Yeah.
But even Hateful Eight, I do remember sitting in the theater and viewing it in the context of Inglourious Basterds, like, to what extent? Well, Django Unchained is that way a bit too.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Now that I know, I like the fact that he just blows up the plantation and gets away at the end is less surprising or cathartic there to me, because I'm like, well, I know he will give himself license to, like, he's not going to be slave to the historical reality that nobody blew up a major plantation.
Of course not. But those are fictional characters too. Right. It's not, you're not killing, Jefferson Davis or whatever. Although that would have been fun. Although it would have just been doing Bastards again, I guess. So
the same thing. Yeah.
Suddenly I have a complaint about Django I didn't know I had. Why didn't Jefferson Davis die?
So does it stand? No one's vetoing Inglourious Basterds?
I mean, I kept Tarantino off my list because as much as I love him,
he's a creature of the 90s.
Well, very much a creature of the 90s, but not just the 90s. Like, his work is almost entirely homage,
right, all
the time. And so
that almost makes a case for him as a creature of the 21st century.
I guess you're right.
And he's partially molded us to be that way, but it feels like everything. Part of being in a culture where everything is IP and prequels and spinoffs and everything is that everything does feel like more of collage.
Yeah. It's a good movie.
I left him off mostly because I couldn't decide. I was like, I don't know what, the same thing I had with Wes Anderson, but I was like I'll let someone else is going to pick one of these movies, and I'm just going to let you guys do it. It's like, I don't want to be the one who. But Inglourious Basterds was the one that I had written on my list. If it came to it, if I kept getting vetoed and I needed to work my way down.
Yeah. All right. No vetoes then. No vetoes used. And we still hitting 2 hours probably here. So it's probably just as well.
Can I do my honorable mention?
We're doing honorable mention.
Let's everybody do a quick honorable mention.
I thought that Into the Spider-Verse deserves a place here.
Okay.
I think in terms of superhero movies and in terms of animation, like, it's doing things that have never been done and will change everything, I think, for animation especially. But it already has sort of started to change a lot of things that are happening in the Marvel universe, even though it's not a Marvel film.
Well, it's multiverse cinema. It's probably, know.
Yeah, to say it's not a fair, it's an unfair knock against the movie that the multiverse has already kind of been ruined after it introduced it and did it well, and then it became everything so fast and nobody else did it well after that.
Fair. Except that Across the Spider-Verse did it even better.
Well, then, I mean,
I roll that into the same, But maybe it's of a piece then with the other stuff I was talking about with Lord of the Rings or Dark Knight. It's like, oh, here's the reason why we're going to continue being assaulted with bad versions of this, because it is, in fact, really, really hard to do properly, almost impossible. And yet there is one example that knocks it so far out of the park that people are going to keep chasing.
Well, I mean, everywhere, everything all at once. Or the reigning Best Picture winner,
That's pretty good.
It's, there's going to be good versions of it. And that will lead the way to many bad versions as well. Yeah. I bet we're not done with new multiverses. I bet we keep doing that for another decade, probably.
Well, yeah, it's a great way to wring every last drop of blood out of intellectual property stone.
Hooray! Yes,
You get to use Spider-Punk.
We got Endgame on our list. We're
Spider-Pig.
close enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm shocked that no one said There Will Be Blood.
It was on my short list.
I thought someone would pick that. I've never seen
Yeah.
that movie, which is a huge
It's super good.
That's why I didn't think of it.
Or like The Social Network.
No
Or-
Fincher.
I mean-
No Fincher at all was a surprise. I had Social Network and Zodiac as potentials.
Yeah.
And I didn't.
Well, for me, I think I think John's a little less so than me on this, but we're covering the same cloth. That my most like heretical film bro opinion is that I am not a fan of PTA. So
Fair.
There Will Be Blood to me is again an incredible towering performance with just a few scattered shreds of a movie clinging to it on the
Damn.
sides.
Okay.
Jesus.
What? Just does any? Do you ever remember a single scene of that movie that features anybody but him? Like you might as well be talking.
There
straight to
aren't
camera.
any. There aren't any without him.
I know. Well, no, but I mean, do you remember another character doing anything interesting? Like-
Paul F. Tompkins is in there.
Paul Dano getting slapped. Yes, the back of Paul Dano's head is. No. Look, okay, fine. Fincher, I'm more interested in talking about briefly because I did have a hard time picking one. I think I had settled on I was actually going to choose Gone Girl.
Right, that was my third.
Just because I think Amy Dunn is a really is an iconic character that will survive in the Hitchcockian popular elements. It's very rewatchable. Yes, film bros love Zodiac. I will tell you that is a high watermark of everything. But again, it's not one people rewatch.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe there's a Jake Gyllenhaal effect.
that was my issue with that movie. That was, I mean, we talked about that one too. Gyllenhaal is not doing it for me in that film, sadly. But it is. I mean, it's kind of a great film anyway. It's still pretty awesome. Social Network, of course, has this. I mean, I don't know. I think are we moving? Are we outgrowing Social Network a little bit at this point? Just because we have so many like Elon Musk like figures running around right now that is kind of like a little bit old hat. Be like, oh wait, so these tech geniuses can be assholes? Really? Is it sort of a little bit outdated in a way now?
I mean, it's certainly a little bit outdated in that like Facebook is not what's happening anymore. Really.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, the social media, but it's not really about social media. Or in some ways, I don't know.
It
Yeah,
kind of is.
I think it is.
Well, I mean, I think it's in a lot of ways it's about what Mark was trying to do through social media, and what Facebook represented at one time as a way of connecting to people, which I think is still very relevant.
Mm-hmm. I like that very much.
it is. It's about the type of person who would create social media, I think is what it's angling at anyway.
It's a very good movie. It's really terrific.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's exquisitely
yeah.
filmed.
And maybe the best
Scored.
film score than William. Well, I don't know. Lord of the Rings is technically qualified, so I guess I'd probably give it to that.
Sure.
But so here's the one that I was considering throwing out. This is my biggest stretch, but I was trying to think of like what's a flag I could plant. And one movie that I think is due for a possible reevaluation and like elevation any day now is The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford.
One of my favorite all-time movies. I thought about it. I just didn't know if it had the juice, the staying power, that other. But I
mean, it's
love
15
that
years old at this point.
Yeah.
So it's hard to argue that it does. Like it seems like it should have happened by now if it would. That's why I had a hard time with it. But I still think we're kind of maybe only like one, person on film Twitter, like putting out like, well, when you look at this movie, it's a Western, but it's kind of about Paris social relationships. And then everybody picks it up and it becomes their new favorite toy.
The starring
and
Casey Affleck thing might be an issue for it.
Yeah.
It might.
that guy.
He's unfortunately really good in it.
Yes.
Playing a really off-putting person, that's what some of those Kevin Spacey performances still work because he's playing creeps. But anyway, no, okay. I mean, it's just if you do get people to pick it up for whatever reason or watch it, the craft on display is so incredible that I think it has potential sticking power with the type of pretentious dweebs that can shape these types of lists that we're doing in years to come. So that's my outlier.
It's a film that should be watched.
Is it more likely than not to happen? No.
My honorable mention is the opposite of that, and it's the one that I wanted to pick, but I couldn't bring myself to pull the trigger on it just with all the other great choices, but super bad. And like I was trying to think, I was like, is there like just a pure comedy that we can put on this list? And Superbad was the one that stuck out that was most likely to be, because it was the most I don't know, knocked up. Things like that don't really hold up as well. The only other choice, Booksmart, I think is a great movie.
For Bridesmaids.
That's a good one.
a great choice.
Yeah.
And Borat, honestly.
Borat was the comedy I had. I was like, probably
Yeah.
Borat. Yeah. I was considering Step Brothers, but Borat was like probably the one I had to say. Yeah. But I didn't turn down.
I guess they're all like Borat is such a unique achievement. I cannot. It's still like just incredible.
Yeah.
Like one of the most impressive things I've ever seen in my life. And they did a sequel. That was also good. Is out.
Shockingly good sequel. Yes.
But it does feel like a thing that was of its moment, and I don't know that it's going to get reevaluated at a certain point. I
think
as a feat of performance, it's unparalleled. But
I think people are going to be looking at it for a long time, being like, "How the fuck did he pull this off?"
It's just kind of stunning as an achievement for sure, and still really funny. And it's an excellent film.
But I think people should be doing that already, though. And I'm not sure what's going to prompt it to be picked up and reevaluated that way. And if anything, actually, I could only see that, well, never mind. But for the thing that I think holds Superbad back is the, problematic elements of it's a raunchy feel-good comedy about a couple of boys conspiring to get women drugged up enough to sleep with them.
Yeah.
But
Go ahead.
But I think that means that I would give the edge to Bridesmaid or potentially Step Brothers over for that way. Step Brothers, for as raunchy as it can be, is so goofy and not of this world. It's a cartoon.
But it also kind of like I think
I don't know.
Points. It is a satire of sort of the stunted development.
Right.
We are
it was
currently
the turning point, and that's why I think it saves a little, but there are still some problematic ideas in there and
For sure.
words and things. Bridesmaids, now that you mentioned Bridesmaids, it can't hold a candle to Bridesmaids, so I think that is the better choice if we're going pure comedy. But I think what was interesting about Superbad, what I defend about it, is that that is what they're trying to do, and they do not succeed at that. And it was the first movie to say, like, to get to the end, and he's in front of the girl, and he says, "No, we're supposed to kiss at this point." And she says, "No, absolutely not. What are you talking about? Like that's not how this works."
Yeah, but she still agrees to go out with him.
What?
Well, it's a movie.
But then she's still like, yeah, but tomorrow I'll go out with you. Just not tonight.
She agrees to, now I wonder, because she agrees to hang out with him while the other two go on a date. I always read that, because I've had this guy, I think people read it different ways. I always read it as, I'm going to babysit you while your best friend goes on a real date. I never took it as Emma Stone and Jonah Hill got together, but that could be me trying to like make it better in my mind so that I'm okay liking it.
Well, she was interested in him.
Yeah.
But like that much is clear, and that sort of it lets him off the hook to a degree. And again, you don't have to have these conversations about Step Brothers, because as much as that's about toxic masculinity or whatever, like it's in such a
stunted development.
Anchorman's a little bit of the same way, but
yeah.
I mean, Anchorman obviously has a lot of the same issues as Superbad,
but it's about that.
Yeah, and it's got some of the issues of Superbad about these guys scheming to sexually harass their female coworker. But because it's in the cartoon world like Step Brothers, it doesn't like raise the same. We're not actually supposed to feel for Brian Fantana, in the way we're supposed to feel for Jonah Hill's character.
Well, these are like broad comedies. These are satirical targets as much as they're characters, which I'd love. That's great. Do that more. Kind of a lost art. It feels like we don't really have comedies of that type anymore. Sadly, even McKay, Adam McKay is like, no, I have to make serious films about climate change.
Yes.
But yeah, the lack of great comedies kind of was a thing. I mean, we just named some of the best ones, but like it's becoming a lost art, which is sad. Like, what's the last great comedy? It's been a while.
I would argue Eurovision Song Contest, the Fire Saga. I'm not joking. I think it's amazing.
It's really funny. Amanda loves that movie. We've watched it a number of times. Have you guys seen that?
No,
I've not. I remember it coming out.
Get on
I've not
it.
seen it.
It's quite funny. I mean, it's Will Ferrell doing Will Ferrell stuff. It's in a lineage with these other films. Yeah.
I did recently just go to the ABBA Museum, so I'm in the Eurovision
You're in the
mindset.
zone.
Yeah,
And
even though I know that was
Yeah.
this is Iceland, right? This the
Yes.
Eurovision movie.
And Rachel McAdams doing
She's great.
just
She's amazing.
and Daniel Stevens, such good work. It's a delight.
Game Night's a really funny movie too. That's a
Game Night is a really fun.
That gets some love now. Yeah, Rachel McAdams is pretty great, actually. But you know what? Now that I think about this, the thing that I think pushes Bridesmaid to the top of the heap of all the Apatow related comedies we talked about is what we are due for is people to catch up and realize just how much of an underrated asset Rose Byrne is. Sort of like the Sam Rockwell or Nicholas Holt. She is again somebody we just undervalue culturally, even though we actually use her quite a bit. And that honestly, maybe that might be on my list of best performances of the millennium as well.
That's a neat choice.
So funny in that movie.
Yeah. Melissa McCarthy in that movie she was nominated for an Oscar.
Oh,
yeah, but that's the big obvious one.
It's also like,
but it wasn't obvious until that movie. I think is the thing.
Yeah,
like she.
Oh no, I mean the performance is
right.
big.
I get what you're saying. The Rose Byrne is the more like the subtle. The
it's grounded, but it's so funny, and it's just a great villain performance. But in a way that has shading. I think that's such a difficult performance that really elevates that movie to me.
All right. I mean, I've still got more, but I'm just going to run through them really quick here. John Wick, I think, really set the tone for a lot of action films going forward.
Sure,
I love it, and a lot of movies look like that now. So it's probably going to keep happening and being played. The Incredibles was the cartoon I was considering, but in superheroes, I think that's a high watermark for Pixar, and so I thought that was worth it. And Hereditary, I thought kind of was modern version of The Exorcist. I think that's the scariest movie.
I think Midsommar is a better film and is more daring.
Is it scarier though?
Shock of all shocks, I kind of agree with John on here. I gave the edge to Hereditary on my list as I was thinking about that. It just, I don't know. Hereditary just goes harder with its big. I don't want to spoil it, but
that was pretty.
You want to talk
hard.
about
they both go
softening up horror?
Those are hard ass films, both of them. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Ari Aster.
Hereditary goes younger, let's say.
Sure, I think Ari Aster is one of the most exciting new filmmakers of this century. I'm very thrilled to see what else he comes up with. I really like Beau is Afraid. Wouldn't make it on this list, but it's certainly worth watching. A hell of a film. He's great. Yeah, and I don't know what else. Pan's Labyrinth.
I would say Aster is one of the most I'm excited to see what's going to come.
Yeah.
And I would put Lanthimos in that category.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Exciting stuff is going to come from that guy.
I hear Poor Things is exceptional.
But he's so inaccessible to the mainstream that I don't know that any of us ever clear the hurdle we're talking about here and get on heavier rotation.
I don't think The Favorite was inaccessible.
That's the most accessible one.
No,
yeah.
But it didn't... Yeah. It's the most by far more so, than The Lobster, sure. But I mean, it's
killing the deer.
Oh God, yeah, the least accessible film ever. Yes,
I was just telling someone to watch The Lobster yesterday, and I was like, but not recommending it in a way that you might like this. I was like, I think you just need to watch it. You might I was like, it was like someone who appreciates a film was like, you might hate it. I don't know if I liked it, but I think you should watch it.
But you certainly can't be sold on it by a plot synopsis. So
yeah, exactly. It's I'm not going to tell you anything about it. Just don't worry about it. It's all right. It's a wild movie.
We're over 2 hours, and we're not going to be able to cut much of this. So
we could say so much more.
The last couple that didn't, I kind of expected somebody else to pick. Maybe was Lost in Translation, as that's just sort of an ennui movie, and depending on what Sofia Coppola's career is, it could be emblematic of her whole career. It's sort of emblematic of serious Bill Murray, which is a wonderful thing that we get to experience. One of the few bright spots of the 21st century. Children of Men for just pure world building.
It's a great film. I feel like that one's really dropped out of the conversation, sadly, even though it's excellent.
It's really, I think, becoming more and more relevant.
Yeah, but it seems like it's dropped out. But I think it remains, again, just for pure world building. It's a touchstone of not every movie can be Children of Men type of thing. It's sort of a touchstone there.
I had one on here that I think is a great movie, but it was almost more because I think it's got a lot of young actors and a filmmaker who's going to be a huge part of the next 40 years of film, and that's Little Women.
Thank you. Yes, I almost put that on
Terrific
there.
movie.
Yeah. Just looking at who's in that, you're like this is going to be in 2060. Someone who's like 20 is going to be looking and being like, wow, all of those people were in a movie together when they were like 23. And it's a great movie.
And what she does with the storytelling is no one's ever taken a classic and fucked with it like that.
To such good
It's
effect.
just amazing.
Yeah.
It
Mhm.
works, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bob Odenkirk being in that movie was almost a jump scare for me. I was unprepared. I was like, so it almost took me out for a second when Bob Odenkirk walked into Little Women. And I was like, what? What is happening?
Yes.
But then I got right back to it. It was fine. But...
Crouching Tiger, Parasite. I can just say words.
Yep, those ones.
I
Those
can't
ones.
stop.
Uh-huh. I had so many. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't decide. I couldn't figure out the criteria for whether Parasite was going to like survive or not. I think in a way,
It will. It's
winning
yeah.
Best Picture
Mhm.
hurts the case for it to be like. There's nothing to rediscover about it after that point. There's a way where that for some of these things to be picked up and revived in future generations, there needs to be something for people to defend about it.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense? I don't know.
I would have one of my favorites. I mean, there's no Spielberg or Scorsese on this list. I probably would have. I was strongly considering The Fabelmans because I love it deeply, but I kind of recognize that is a personal pick. That is not one for everyone. I thought about Casino Royale, but it's an excellent film. But it's part of a very long continuity of Bond films, and I don't think that quite, even though it's my favorite one, I don't know. And just a bunch of personal favorites that probably don't belong here. Plenty of those,
The Departed was on my list, but I almost felt like, in a weird way, Dark Knight occupied the same spot as Departed, even though like one's a superhero movie, one's not. Like it's like, but it like, I was like, for some reason, those two in my mind, it's like one or the other. But I love The Departed.
I mentioned it along with Shawshank actually when we were talking about Dark Knight as just a cable movie in the sense that you can turn on any scene and it almost doesn't matter. Like if you're following the story, it's just the scene work is so entertaining from moment to moment.
Yeah.
That's a lot of Scorsese heads view that as one of his lesser movies and the one he should not have won for and all that.
Oh, it's a snooty. That's a snooty.
My favorite to watch.
Yeah, I disagree. I remember watching it and being like, I thought it was as good as Goodfellas walking out of that theater.
Me too.
And I said that to someone,
It's
and
my
they
favorite
yelled at me.
Scorsese.
And I was like, all right, I'll not share this opinion.
It's very entertaining. I mean, that's the thing, It's just a kick-ass blast to watch that one. All right. Look, I think
I can't keep doing this.
I think we got to stop. We got to stop, right? We got to end this. We got to end this. Thank you all for listening. We had a blast here talking about these. This is everything I hoped for when I brought up this idea. Thank you all for bringing your A game here and giving this the due consideration and allowing us to indulge in this and really get into the weeds here on what we think is going to last the tested time here. Thank you, Gwen. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Al. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here, for posterity's sake, the final 12 films that we picked: the Lord of the Rings trilogy, counted as one film; the Royal Tenenbaums; Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind; Get Out; No Country for Old Men; Mad Max: Fury Road; Mulholland Drive; The Dark Knight; Avengers: Endgame; Spirited Away; Brokeback Mountain; and Inglourious Bastards. Yeah, yes. Yay.
Heck of a
One of
list.
these
Great
things
list.
is not like the other. Does it belong?
What were you going to pick if we vetoed Endgame?
Gone Girl.
Okay, cool. All right. Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for listening.